You'll be very pleased to know that the carp care kit that we've been using for the last probably 4 or 5 years on all of our films is finally coming out. It has been tested to destruction. I'm sitting here at Gigantica at the moment, and the slings have been over here for the last couple of years. And obviously if they're getting used by loads of different people with big fish repeatedly, a year's use over here is like 10 years of your normal fishing. And through that we've been able to iron out all the weaknesses so that the ones that come out are going to last an extremely long time, and most importantly be very, very kind to the carp. So the slings, first of all, I'm very proud of these. I spent a lot of time designing these. I did the original tracker ones, and that original design has changed for whatever reason. And it's nice to have the full sort of freedom to do something exactly how I wanted it. So first of all, we made the material really soft. It's like sack material, perforated with loads of holes in so you get really good water circulation. And it's really, really kind to the fish. Doesn't remove slime off of the fish. Doesn't make their fins, the tips of their fins go white or anything like that, where some of the other materials can be quite abrasive. And they're shaped sort of half moon shaped. The fish just sit in them perfectly when you're weighing them. Of course, you still need to make sure the fins are flat against the body, but the fish can literally spin round in the bottom of them and be absolutely fine. And I use them for weighing the fish. Obviously, you'll see us when we get a fish in the net. We'll break the net down, we'll slide the net into the sling, we'll take the fish out of the water in the sling, making sure the fins are already flat to the body, normally rod in hand as well. And then once it's got onto the mat, then we'll take the hook out, slide the net out of the way. The sling would have already been zeroed on the scales, and then we're weighing the fish in the same sling. And then if we want to retain it for any period of time, we're leaving it in the edge with the same sling. The zips are really, really smooth, so they do up really easily. And there's a really clever little clip that we've put in the middle that you can clip both zips into, so there's no way the fish can get back out. We've all had it with those zip up slings. You don't do the zips properly, or the zips around the end, and the fish forces his way out. I've had 30 pounders go missing, and it's heartbreaking. So, to have something that you have to have the zips in the middle at the top, which is the hardest place for the fish to break through, and they're clipped together as well. You might think, oh, that's really dangerous, the fish can't get out of it, but all of them float. They've got 2 bars on. The bars have got the foam covering the whole bar to protect the fish's fins against the bar, to make the bars as slim as possible and make the whole thing as light as possible. So they look really neat. They weigh much lighter than the other sling, but they float no matter what. So if one did get away from the cord, it would only float into the edge somewhere, and then you would go around and find it. I've never had that happen. The cords we're using on them are bright green. They're nice and long, so that if you've got to put it out a long way because the margins are shallow, you've still got that option. And it means you can immediately see where the sling is because the cord is leading its way up to it. Now there are going to be 2 sizes. We're launching with one, which is the 50, so to take fish up to 50 pound. I've weighed 60 pounders in them repeatedly when I've been out in France. They're more than big enough for that, but we sort of wanted to rate them with something. There will be an 80 sling, which we've been testing here at Gigantica. That is an absolute monster. But if you're fishing abroad and you're fishing for really big fish all the time, that's going to be the one you'll want, but that's coming out later on. We're still putting that through its paces. These things really have to last the test of time for them to actually come out in the range. So the slings are available in the dark camo material and also the green material, up to you which one you choose. They do exactly the same job. And one last thing about retaining fish, right? There's a load of sort of stuff that goes around about you shouldn't retain them in slings, they should go in a sack. Well, actually, I've spoken to Simon Scott about this, and it's far better for a fish to be in a sling than it is in a sack. And the reason for that is if the sack sinks to the bottom, it's sitting amongst the detritus on the bottom and the weed, and at night, which is usually when we've got a fish retained, all that material is drawing oxygen out of the water. So it's actually the lowest oxygen environment. If you put the fish on the surface, more oxygen goes into the water via the surface layer than any other way, much more than the weed produces underneath. So keeping the fish on the surface actually puts them in the best condition they can be in. And I have no issue with catching a fish in the dark, in the colder weather, and keeping it overnight and doing the pictures in the morning. Obviously it's a personal choice, but these are carp that I personally own. They're part of my livelihood, and if I thought I was going to do them any damage, I absolutely would not do it. And the thing we're laying them down on is the new Hybrid Mat. Again, that's available in dark camo and in green, depending on what you want to choose. And the thing about this is it's got a flat base to it, so a foam base, but the ring that goes on top of it is a separate bag that's been stitched up. It's not a bit of plastic, and that bag is sort of almost like bivvy material, and that is full of polyballs. So you've got a raised area around the outside and then a sunken part in the middle that takes it down to the foam bottom. So the foam obviously is still more than thick enough to protect the fish from the ground, but you've got that raised ring around the outside that stops the fish being able to get off the mat. So they obviously float on the surface of the water, so if you're doing water shots, you can put the fish on the mat, pick the fish up, slide the mat out of the way and get your shots done. They're very, very lightweight because the bag that the foam is in is sealed up super tight, so they don't take water on. They fold in half and clip together, and they've got straps at the end, so they go on the end of your barrow. You know, if you want to do it that way, they can go long ways as well. I tend to put them across the crossbars of my barrow, and I actually put my single system, I slide them into them because it's such a big compartment underneath. So we put a lot of thought into it. You know, it's not the cheapest mat on the market, but I think it is by far the best. Following on from them, you've got the Kaizen green nets. So like the Kaizen green rods, you've got a slightly lower modulus carbon, which makes them a tiny bit heavier than the platinums, or in this case, the springbow nets, but they are still very, very light. They float with no net float, which is amazing. They're reverse tapered, so they're much stiffer than a normal net, with a little stainless cap on the end of them. So you can stick them into the edge and be all carpy and retain your fish that way if you want to. They've got a really nice heavy duty moulded spreader block. And the important part about that is the holes in the spreader block are big enough so you can get the net together and apart really easily. There's nothing worse than trying to get one together that's got tiny little pins to put together. We've gone away from that completely and just made sure that they just pop straight in and out. So if you're taking a fish, you know, out of the water, you can just get rid of the pole straight away, slide the net into the sling, and boom, you're away. And then the last thing is the weigh bar. Again, we've used this for ages. You would have seen it on the films for the last few years. There have been loads of different versions of it. And Damien, being the very clever product developer that he is, has designed a carabiner sort of clip system on the end. So once you clip your scales onto it, they're clipped on permanently. They can't fall off. We all know what it's like. You pick the bar up, the scales fall off, the fish is on the mat, you get in a panic. You know, it's so nice just to clip the scales onto it. They stay on there for the rest of the session, and then the spike on the end just goes into the ground. Put the bar down to give yourself a bit of slack, clip the weigh sling onto the hook underneath the scales, and then just push up against it, and you'll see it's so heavy duty, you're never going to bend it. That little carabiner on sort of a pivot point just works perfectly every time, and you get a perfect reading on your own. That's the nice thing with the spike, you can do everything on your own. It keeps it super, super stable. And although it comes in 2 pieces, you know, so you can get it in a smaller bag, I leave it in one and just put it down the spine of my rod bag, and it keeps the rod bag nice and straight when you haven't got rods in it as well. So all of these things have been really well thought out, tested absolutely to destruction for years. I'm very proud that they're all coming out by the end of summer this year. If you're into carp care, which we all are, I'm sure they'll make a great addition to your armoury. Thank you, my darling. I'll have to get bigger and eat more boilies. Yes.